Welcome in to the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you here with us, joining us for episode 59 of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Joey and I have a fun episode in store for today as we are ranking our Disney live action TV shows. That's including Andor, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Mando, and the Book of Boba Fett. Going to be a fun episode, a ranking episode, one of our favorites to do. But before we get into all of that, a quick reminder, if you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, check us out over there on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We are at 351 subscribers over there. Thank you to all those of you who are subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel. Additionally, you can also reach us at hothhangout@gmail.com with any comments or questions, Star Wars or otherwise. We'd love to listen to some of your thoughts over email. Again, hothhangout@gmail.com. Additionally, you can check out the audio version of the Hoth Hangout podcast everywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple. Additionally, we are reachable on all the socials, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, or X at Hoth Hangout on each of those platforms. Once again, we want to welcome you into this episode of the podcast. Hope you're having a great day. Joey, what's going on, man? I know you're feeling a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, the of course, with the winter coming along, my daughter got a little bit of a cold from school, so then I picked it up, and so now I'm back to popping cough drops during the middle of this podcast. So, but other than that, doing pretty good. Just waiting for the day that we have like a couple of weeks off from work. So that's I'm just running the time on at this point.
Nice, nice. It's hard to believe it's already December, by the way.
hmm
Like I don't know where that time went.
And it should say for this is being episode 59. Did you know that the last week we actually recorded 100 episodes? Not 100 episodes,
Yes,
100 videos.
I
That's
saw
including
that.
shorts and other things. So yeah, 100 videos.
Right, we're 100 videos deep into the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, and here's to the next 100. Do you have a favorite of the first 100 videos, just off chance?
Oh geez, I'd have to think
That
about it a
was a
little
big
bit.
question to pose
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
just
spur
out
of
of
the moment.
nowhere.
Yeah,
I think our reaction videos are always fun to do.
yeah.
And really probably like the first I would like to go back to the first episodes to see how we looked and how we sounded and how everything went.
Yeah, Gibbo saying the episode 5 Ahsoka reaction, that was a
Of
great one,
course,
yeah,
yeah. That was a great
yeah.
one.
Well, before we get into just a quick, brief bit of news today, another reminder related to today's topic of Disney live action TV shows. In next week's episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast, we're also going to be bringing on some guests, and we'll announce who those guests will be at the end of today's podcast. Just wanted to plug that really quick and let you all know that next week's episode is going to focus largely on the same topic as this week, but bring in some more voices from the community of Star Wars and hear from them as well. So be on the lookout for that. Our first piece of news today that we want to touch on, and actually one of our really only pieces of real news, is that Skeleton Crew, the release date, which was, I think, originally intended to be quarter 1 of 2024, has now been pushed back all the way to holiday time of 2024, meaning quarter 4. And so we see maybe like a 10, 11 month pushback of this show. And again, this is one that we have kind of a pretty good idea what it's gonna be about, but is still going to be introducing us largely to brand new characters, and so, there's a lot of unknowns that come with that is what I'm trying to say, and so, looks like we're gonna have to wait almost an entire year for this show to come out. What was your initial reaction when you heard this news, Joey?
A little confusing. I mean, I thought that production was done on this. If we were thinking that Q1 was going to be the target date for it. And was this the one that had the date that was on some government website of the patent or the
I
copyright?
think
Was it this
so.
one?
Yes,
Right,
I
yeah.
believe so.
So I mean that and I think that was really the estimated time of arrival for that, and I think that was December 2023. I think that was actually supposed to be this month, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. But all that to say, I mean, not too upset about it, not really knowing a ton about what's going to be happening in that show. Like you said, it does bring a bunch of new characters into the Star Wars universe, which is always fun. But I think at this point, I think we're okay with the amount of characters that we have right now that we have to keep up with. So, we could take that time and really enjoy what we've got right now. And then when that comes next holiday season, and I think we even said this before with this kind of show, I think it'd be could be a nice and cozy type of show with the kids and Jude Law and everything. So I think it should be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I love my guy Jude Law. He's one of my favorite actors actually. So but unfortunately, as you said, we'll have to maybe wait until next holiday season in order to check him out in the new Skeleton Crew show. It is surprising though. I was under the assumption that, and I think we're correct in assuming that the production on this has completely wrapped. So I don't know what all went into that decision to delay it, but whatever the reasoning was, hopefully in the long run it just makes it a better show. Maybe give it more time to perhaps edit out some of the things it wasn't sure about, or maybe make it just that much better of a show in the post-production phase. So, again, we'll see this show probably in like 10 or 11 months time from now. And I should also mention, I don't know if this was officially announced by Star
Right.
Wars, but it was
Correct.
a report from the Bespin Bulletin, which is a very reputable Star Wars source. And so this isn't something that's like just speculation per se. It is something that is likely true, but has not been officially confirmed by Disney or Star Wars. However, it is being reported by very reputable sources. So just wanted to make a note of that in case anyone was wondering, "Oh, I didn't see that from Disney." Yeah, they have not officially announced this, but more than likely this will end up being a big delay. So, um, with that being our only piece of real news today, Joey and I have just brief things that we wanted to do before we get into some of the viewer comments from last week's podcast. Joey has a quick update for me, and then I have a little surprise for
Yeah.
him. So,
Yes. So my little quick update. I've been, of course, I'm a collector. I do like the Star Wars figures, Legos, games, everything. So I did complete a Lego build recently, and I wanted to show it off a little bit here on the video version of the podcast. So here is a little
oh,
Mandalorian
that's awesome.
uh, Lego helmet here. It took me just under 3 hours to finish, and it was a lot of fun actually to do.
Nice.
So, yeah, the little
I
Mandalorian. I have a Darth Vader one as well, like, in this scale too,
ooh.
but this is the one that I completed, just last night, actually.
I was at Target 2 weeks ago picking out Christmas presents,
Mhm.
and I saw this on the shelf and was like, "Oh, man, I really wanna buy that for
Yeah,
myself."
do it.
It looks super cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and they have, like, this whole helmet series on Lego, so there's Vader, there's Mando, there's Boba Fett, there are, Commander Cody, Captain Rex, they
Mhm.
have, like, all of these different helmets, so it's taking everything in me to not buy every single one of those and building those and displaying them all across my room, but, yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to put these together.
Nice, that's awesome. Do you wanna plug a Twitch channel where you did that on?
I mean, yes, in fact, I did do that, on my Twitch channel. If you look up, It's Kuya Joey, I will put it in the show notes here if you wanted to watch me build some Legos. I build Legos every Saturday there, and, yeah, it's a lot of fun, so come on by.
Nice. Yeah, that looks super cool. I might have to give myself a Christmas present,
Mhm.
all I'm
Can you ima
saying.
wait, is there another Twitch channel we need to learn about, or
You mean the inactive one?
the inactive one that's been, yeah, what has it been, 8 months now or something
Oh
like
gosh, I don't even know. Probably longer.
that?
But yeah, both the Twitch links are in the show notes. I recommend going to Joey's and checking him out, doing some Legos and lots of other fun stuff too throughout the week as well. All right, I have a surprise for you, Joey.
Alright, let's see what yours is.
This is something that we've talked about before on the
Mhm.
podcast. And you remember how I showed you, I think it was 3 weeks ago, maybe something like that, where I showed you the gifts I got from
Mhm.
Hallmark that were the Ahsoka ornament as well as
Yeah.
the Scooby Doo. Did I show you the Scooby Doo one? Maybe I
I
didn't
don't
show you
remember the
that one.
Scooby-Doo one. No, I don't remember
Right.
the Scooby-Doo one.
I showed you the Ahsoka one, I think,
Mhm.
because obviously it pertains to the podcast. And so part of what Hallmark does is you and I were looking at an ornament,
Oh.
I think weeks before that. And so without my knowing, uh, my girlfriend signed up on a list to be contacted if they received shipments
No way.
of a particular Star Wars ornament. They called her last week, and she went in to pick it up while she wasn't with me, and so she gave it to me as a gift a couple days ago. We actually, we're setting up a Christmas tree together recently,
Mhm.
and so, I do have the
Yes!
Han Solo Star Wars ornament here. Uh,
Nice.
and for those that don't know, we reacted to a video of this maybe, like, a month and a half ago or something on the podcast, and,
Mhm.
there's the part of the ornament in the center actually goes down with Han Solo on it and then reemerges with
Yes.
him in carbonite, so,
Right.
we might have to do a live action demonstration of this at some point.
Yes, that's awesome.
But I just wanted to
Nicely
share that with
done.
you, and, so I
Hey,
saw that and I was like, "Oh, no way, this is the
I'm
coolest
gonna go
gift."
Imma go ahead and say this, I think she's a keeper.
Yeah. She listens to the podcast, so she'll be
Nice.
able to hear, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Nice.
couple cool things there in regards to the Mando helmet and the Han Solo, Christmas ornament, so just fun little bits we wanted to include before we got to some of your comments and our your feedback from our last episode. We have got 2 comments to showcase during this podcast. The first of which is from Lord Galvatron. Lord Galvatron says, in response to our question of the day from the last episode, in which we covered some of the shortcomings of the Disney era of Star Wars. Lord Galvatron says, "What has Disney done wrong? Ultimately, many of Disney's wrongdoings stem from decisions made in the sequel trilogy. And while I stand on the fact that the sequels are my favorite, there are definitely problems I can't ignore. I don't think the studio was involved enough when it came to planning this trilogy, which led to the lack of cohesion between 7 and 8. But I also think they got too involved during the production of 9. They tried way too hard to please every fan after the reception of Last Jedi. And if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one." I thought that was the part of this comment that I read, and I was like, that is very, very true. I think that is really a lot of what they did with Rise of Skywalker. Lord Galvatron goes on to say, "The blackballing of John Boyega is unforgivable. The premise of his character was something so fresh and exciting and was completely, utterly wasted. Not to be cynical, but I think it would have been better for his character if he died sacrificing himself on Crate to save the rebellion." I thought about that and I was like, actually, I think that would have
Mhm.
been more influential and more compelling in terms of the overall story. So I would agree with the second point as well. And then the final point Lord Galvatron makes is says, "I did mention last week that Star Wars on Disney Plus has yet to miss, and I do believe that there are 2 things I wasn't a fan of. One being Moff Gideon goes out like a punk. His
Mm.
death could have been better. Second, Boba Fett getting his show hijacked wasn't a great look. Sure, the episodes are awesome, but a lot of that stuff should have been in Mando season 3." And then, of course, Lord Galvatron said he tried to keep it concise, but there's more overall to be said. But these are the biggest things that Star Wars failed with, and then commented as well on Chief Creative Officer Dave Filoni, newly instated in Disney. So I think Lord Galvatron makes some great points. The final sentence of the first point, if you try to please
Mhm.
everyone, you end up pleasing no one, is something that I was like, oh yeah, that is a good way of kind of summarizing what Episode 9 tried to do.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you to Lord Galvatron for that comment, and we appreciate you. Keep the comments coming. Our second and final comment for this episode is from Aunt Vesuvi. I mentioned in the last episode that I had never had stuffing before this Thanksgiving. I honestly don't know what kind of stuffing it was. It was my girlfriend's great grandmother's recipe, so whatever is used in that recipe. Aunt Vesuvi also says a lot of people use regular bread, an elevated version of stovetop, but my maternal grandmother used to make the best with cornbread. Cornbread stuffing. That sounds very delicious. Also, on Vesuvi says, "Joey, since you mentioned your mom being in Thailand, I spent 3 weeks there in December 2001, Bangkok
Hmm.
and Pattaya Beach." I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, so much beauty and deliciousness. Since Anthony's comment from last week mentioned the radio drama retelling of New Hope, I remember loving it, but it was strange hearing someone else do Vader. It is on YouTube, so maybe we can react to that, Joey, if it's all on
Mhm.
YouTube. I'll have to maybe plan an episode of that sometime in the near future. Avasuvi also concludes the comment saying the longest version is nearly 5 hours. There are also ones for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. All good despite some minor inconsistencies to canon. Cheers, Gibbo. The New Hope radio drama. What do you think, Joey?
Mm. Oh, I think we can knock that out, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, we got to. Neither of us have seen it, right?
Mhm. Or heard
Right.
it, actually.
Or heard it. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So it is the YouTube version. It wouldn't be video then. It would just be like a
R
stagnant screen of.
I would assume as much, yeah. So maybe that's a podcast only
Right.
episode for us, or
Yeah.
a listener only podcast episode.
Right, right. Well, obviously, we wanna thank you for your comment and, for the insightful, thoughts you've had as well, and for the kind of touching on aspects of, various parts of Joey and I's lives in your comment as well. Yeah.
Stuffing.
The stuffing, yes. The official food of the Hoth Hangout podcast.
Yeah.
Uh, sponsorship pending. The time has arrived, Joey, for us to rank
Mhm.
and rate our live action Disney Star Wars TV shows.
Did
Um,
Did you notice the shirt I was wearing, by the way? I don't know if
I
that gives
did
away
notice
anything.
that. I
If
wore
anyone's
some,
if given anything away.
I wore a little bit of merch, but mine doesn't give away as much as to my favorite shows. So I'm
Interesting, okay.
curious to see your rankings. I think with only 5 live action Disney Star Wars shows, there can only be so much variation in our rankings. It's not exactly like when we did our rankings of the films when there's obviously
Mhm.
more films than there are live action TV shows. So
Right.
having said that, if you've never seen Joey and I do an episode like this, we will say it is definitely an episode you can listen to. It's also a fun episode if you want to watch the video version because producer Gibbo has constructed some pretty cool graphics for us that is going to display our picks one by one as we go along, revealing both of our fifth picks at the same time, then our fourth, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally concluding with our top overall picks. So, in case you're not aware, familiar with what the 5 live action Disney TV shows are in the Disney Plus era of Star Wars, we'll call it. Those shows are The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, the Book of Boba Fett, and Andor. So, Joey and I gonna each be putting 5 of those in order. We should also mention each of these shows have 1 season except for The Mandalorian, which has 3 seasons, which that piece of the discussion may or may not come into play at some point here. Um, what do you think, Joey? You got any more thoughts before we start our rankings?
No, let's get to it.
All right. And also, we encourage you watching and listening to comment down below your rankings 1 through 5. And just as another reminder, next week we're going to bring on some guests to the podcast and essentially have them do a relatively similar variation of what we're doing here in today's episode and have them give their 5 favorite shows as well. So, without further ado, should we check out each of our fifth ranked Disney Star Wars live action show,
Here we go. Well,
Book of Boba Fett? We
for both of
I
us.
I think we figured that this would probably be both of our least favorites. I
Mhm.
think it was actually I debated between this and one other show that will be on the 4th
Really?
spot on my list. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, although I think in the end, I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I mean, when I think about just pure enjoyment, this was certainly number 5 on my list, for what it's
Mhm.
worth. Should also mention that these are our personal favorite rankings. This isn't like some objective measure that each of us are trying to make. This is just like purely how
Right.
much each of us enjoyed these shows. The main thing you gotta say about Boba, and this is the largest criticism of it, is that it is essentially halfway through turns into The Mandalorian season 2.5. I think I've
Mhm.
said a few times that it felt like in the production of this show was during the craziness that was Mandalorian season 2, and it feels like it happened, like, in the middle of this show. And because I think it's episode 4, episode 5, where it's like suddenly Boba Fett is just not really a main point in the show hardly at all. And, the characters in the show just kind of turns into the Mando and Grogu show.
Mhm.
Disney knows what their moneymaker is, and they're like, "All right, Boba, you're out. Grogu and Mando, you're in." So that is a big downside to this show. I will say. I think other than
Mhm.
that, it's just a little bit slow, excuse me. And then something that I think upset a lot of longtime fans of the Star Wars original trilogy is that they really just changed the character of Boba in a way that a lot of people did not resonate with.
Mhm.
So those were kind of my biggest criticisms of the show. What did you think, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, to start off where you left off, there are Boba Fett, um, there are Boba Fett fans out there from way in the beginning. And the little piece that he actually got in in the original trilogy, they stuck with him the entire time. They loved the figures. One of the most sought after figures is a Boba Fett figure, like a prototype Boba Fett figure. We'll talk about that later. I think it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars if you didn't know. But there's so you definitely have the fan base for it. So it's unfortunate that it didn't come to for like to a good place as far as this show. I mean, this was for me when I was going into this show, I wasn't like really hyped up to watch it, to be honest. And the problem that I see with the show is that there's no like real memorable moments for me that happen. Each of the other shows, I feel like there's like at least one moment where I'm like, yes, I remember that. That was awesome. Unfortunately, the only memory I have from this show is that one guy that was spinning after the spin during the battle, and he was just the
Right.
360 no scope. That was the only piece that I remember. So unfortunate, but yeah, I think that's why I had to had him have the Book of Boba Fett at number 5.
Well, and the cool moments from this show were everything that revolved around someone who wasn't Boba Fett. You know what I mean? It was
Exactly.
like, "Oh, it's like, this is really cool, but this has nothing to do with Boba." And it was more so just about, like, this is a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen Book of Boba Fett, but it was like Mando and Grogu and even Luke at one point. I think another big detriment, to the show is that it basically, because it's like Mando season 2.5, there's parts of this show that if you didn't see it, then Mando season 3 becomes confusing. Because at the end of Mando season 2, you see how it ends, Luke takes Grogu, and you're just like, "Oh, okay, like, Mando and Grogu aren't gonna be together when season 3 starts." And then season 3 starts, and, um and they're together, and you're like, "Wait, how did this happen?" And so if you don't watch Book of Boba, Mando season 3 becomes more confusing, I think. I don't know if that's a bigger detriment to The Mandalorian or a bigger detriment to Book of Boba Fett, but I think it's just something notable and worthy to bring up in this discussion. So, um, we had a bit of, like, reverb there during that last segment a little bit. Hopefully, it won't come into play anymore going forward. I can't hear it anymore, so just as a heads up for any of you listeners who are wondering why my voice might have been going through a little bit there, I think we've solved that issue. And so, do you have anything more to cover on Boba Fett, or should we move on to our fourth ranking?
Let's move on to number 4.
Okay, this is where I think we might start to drift apart, but it might
Let's
still be
see.
the
Yeah.
same. Oh, we're the
Nope.
same
It's the
still.
same. Yeah,
Okay,
it's the same. Yeah.
okay. You want to talk about Obi-Wan first, since I talked
Yeah.
about
Sure.
Boba? Okay.
Yeah. I think I mean, it's a short list, right? It's only 5. As much as I did enjoy Kenobi, I mean, some of the great things is we got Hayden Christensen back. They battled against each other again. They had a great storyline with a youngling kind of becoming one of the Inquisitors. So I mean, that actually was a really good show, But and I've talked about this before, whether we're doing one of our drafts or one of these, rank these shows type of episodes, is that eventually, what you end up doing is stacking it against all the other shows.
Mhm.
So, if you have Kenobi, it didn't quite meet the other 3, So I don't think this does necessarily mean that it's a bad show at all. It just means that there's 5 and something had to be number 4, So I think there was just a ton of great content that came out of this. I think there's some great characters that came out of it. And no, I enjoyed it. I think we did a rewatch of this after the year anniversary of the of its showing. And yeah, you and I both enjoyed the rewatch, and uh, I think we picked up a couple of things along the way. And yeah, I think it's a good show. I think I loved having the old cast back, especially after everything that Hayden Christensen gone through during the prequels and the criticisms that were given to him because of his because of because of the prequels. So to have him welcome back into the Star Wars community, so much so that they actually put him back into Star Wars, a show. I think that's, like, the best part of it, is that we can now uh, kinda come to terms with all of that. Yeah, like, listen, we know that the fans were kinda bad back then, and maybe continued to, have some bad eggs here and there, but for the most part, we were able to welcome him back into Star Wars. We see him in here, we see him in Ahsoka, so it's just I think that's why I enjoy this show, but again, just because it's 4th does not mean it's bad in any sense.
Right. Yeah, I think the main thing that you mentioned that I would like to reiterate is how much I enjoyed seeing Ewan McGregor in the role of Obi-Wan and how much I enjoyed seeing Hayden Christensen in the role of Anakin or Darth Vader, I guess. And so those were definitely high points for me. I think the reason I actually almost debated it putting this 5. That
Mm,
may be a little bit surprising. I would say the parts of this show that I feel like could be better. I think it functions better as a film or a movie, and I think that shows when you watch this show. There's just certain parts that don't feel like it flow very well, in my opinion. I think it could have focused more largely on Obi-Wan. I think it focused a lot on Riva, and I know people have their concerns about concerns is probably putting it lightly. A lot of people just don't like Riva as a character. For
mhm,
one reason or another. I'm okay with Riva as a character. Um, I just didn't need that much of her in a show that I was expecting all to be about Obi-Wan. And
mhm, right,
so with that in mind, I think the way they kind of alternate between Riva and Obi-Wan, Riva, Obi-Wan, it's almost like a 50-50 screen time thing when I would much
mm,
rather this be an like purely Obi-Wan's show.
sure,
I think the actress who played Leia was excellent. I don't necessarily think I needed as much Leia as we got, but I'm less critical of that point.
mhm,
Um, my main thing I want to get across is I think this would have worked so much better as a movie. Um, I
mm.
don't think it did anything to lessen my enjoyment of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. But I just wish we had gotten more Obi-Wan. Actually, I also wish we would have gotten more, Qui-Gon, more Liam Neeson.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
That was maybe a little bit of a spoiler too if you haven't seen Obi-Wan, but, if you're
Shouldn't be watching
listening.
this
Yeah, I
episode
was
then.
gonna say, if you're watching this episode, you hopefully have seen all these shows, so, if not, apologies for the spoiler right there, but the scene that I also, like, kinda got me in this show relatively early on is the scene where Leia is being kidnapped and she's, like, being chased through the
Yeah, that's
trees.
right.
I'm like, "These guys are, like, grown men struggling to catch
Mhm,
a nine-year-old girl or however old she is, and they're,
mhm.
like, running into trees and, like, tripping over their
Yeah,
own feet." I'm like, "Okay, what's happening right
yeah,
now?"
yeah, it wasn't one of them flee from, Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Yes, yeah. Also, the scene where Obi-Wan, like, puts her in his trench coat and then walks out of the station, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Really? No one sees that?" But
It
that's a
reminds me of,
nitpick.
like, old cartoons or old, like, movies where the kids would, like, stack up on top of each other in a trench
Yes.
coat and pretend to be an adult, it's the
Yeah.
same type of thing.
Yeah.
But I will
Yeah.
say that I did like you mentioned, having little Leia there. I did like that it kind of spun us pretty early on
Mhm.
because for me anyway, I thought we were gonna watch Obi-Wan basically protect Luke the entire series.
I think that's what a lot of
And it
people
was
thought, yeah.
yeah, and it was a completely different storyline after that. So I thought that was really cool, really smart.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so but I was the same way. I enjoyed the character of Leia. I always like Leia's stories, so to see a little bit more insight into her growing up and actually meeting like hanging out with Ben the entire time and
Mhm.
we no one ever knew this actually happened. So I thought that was a cool little spin and a little addition to her story.
I think the last thing I wanna make a point of is I think Obi-Wan, the Obi-Wan show, one of the problem it suffers from that it does suffer from is that there was so much hype and anticipation behind this show that I think
Mm.
people think more lowly of it than it would be otherwise because it didn't meet the expectation. Ironically, another show we're gonna talk about today is almost the opposite. Like, the
Mhm.
expectations were so low or not even there that when the show was as good as it was, and you guys might know what show I'm already talking about, and we'll talk about it here in a second. That it was just like, oh my gosh, like I did not expect this to be that good, that sort of thing. So,
Mhm,
but kind of the flip thing here with Obi-Wan, that there was so much hype, so much anticipation that I think a lot of people were somewhat disappointed when it came out. So I don't mind the show. I do like it.
mhm.
I like it more than Boba Fett. But it does end up at fourth place on my personal ranking. So
Alright.
I want to preface my top three by saying
Okay.
that I feel like in a year I could go any direction on my 1 through 3. I'm
Mhm.
just saying that when I formulated my list at this point in time, at the beginning of December in the year 2023, this is how I'm currently feeling about these shows.
Mhm.
Having said that, a year from now, 1 through 3 could be very interchangeable. So,
Thank you for
uh,
the disclaimer. I think that
yes,
goes for honestly, that goes for me too, so I'm because of that disclaimer, I am very interested in what our top 3s are and if they even match up.
I think we're gonna have a well, actually, no, you know what? I'm gonna say we have the same number 3.
Okay. Alright, let's see it.
Yeah, we
Ah!
do. I think our whole lists might be the same.
Yeah, it might be.
Also, for those that don't know, Joey and I we don't know what each other's picks are prior
Yes.
to the podcast. We send them to Gibbo, and then Gibbo puts them into
Mhm.
the format for us. So we both have the Mandalorian at number 3 on each of our lists. Um, I guess I can go first on this one. I think it's really important when you talk about this position that if it were not for season 3 of Mandalorian, it would probably be number 1 on my list. I think season 3 did a relatively large detriment to the show, and not that it was bad, that it just felt very different from the first 2 seasons, a little bit slower, a little bit less high stakes. Um, in the end, Gideon kind of felt like not a super fulfilling character, not a super fulfilling end. They kinda drop all this stuff about cloning, and then the whole place, like, blows up, and you're like, "So, did any of that matter? I'm not really sure."
Mhm, mhm,
I love a lot of the characters for what it's worth in The Mandalorian, and I think the novelty of this being the first Star Wars live action TV show will never die as long as, like, Star Wars TV shows are a thing.
mhm.
I think this will
Right.
forever be, like, cemented and ingrained in people's minds as, like, the show that started the Disney Plus era of Star Wars, and for that reason, I think the season 1 and season 2 of this show are arguably the best live action Disney Plus, seasons. There's probably one other one that I would incorporate with those 2. But, overall, The Mandalorian has given us these 2 really lovable characters in very different ways, of course. Grogu more in the traditional sense of, like, squishy and fun and lovable, and Mando more in the sense of, like, the rogue who's endearing because he cares for Grogu, and they function really well together. The story was just fantastic in the first 2 seasons, especially. Um, and again, 1 through 3 could go any direction for me on any given day. At the end of season 3 with where we are now, and maybe this will change after season 4, I would not be shocked. But where we are now at the end of season 3, I've gotta put Mando in the 3rd spot, just barely behind number
Mhm.
2 for me.
Alright. Yeah, and just to reiterate everything that you basically said, yeah, I think if it wasn't for the season 3, again, not saying that it's bad, but it was this is a different story now. This is the story of Bo-Katan now,
Mhm,
and if this was a different series, maybe there's a spin-off of her at some point or something, but, the reason that we loved it early on was because of the relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu. Full stop, that's what it was, And where that still continues on here, it's very much in the background. It's very much just a secondary type of story, and it's not as, in front and center, right in your face the entire time. Now, does it still tell a great story? Absolutely. In season 3, I thought it was great how they were able to kind of bring in all these Mandalorians and have them unite together, and, there's all the action, there's lots of funny parts, but there was Jack Black and Lizzo. So, I think the
That's
I think
true,
to
I
go
forgot about that.
yeah, so just kind of the random cameo there, which kind of was right in the middle of it. Unfortunately, that's one of the things that stick out for my season 3 of Mandalorian. There isn't a Luke showing up at the end, at a battle there. That's not the one that's not the season, thing, the type of thing that you remember in season 3. It's like a meme. It's like, oh, by the
Mm,
way, here's Jack Black. And Lizzo just because we can. As much as I thought that was a fun episode, it's not what I'm looking for as far as, my Star Wars content. It goes right in the line, with the spinning shot guy. So I think it's unfortunate. So it did drop again for me to the 3rd spot. And like I said before, all these are, it's just because we're ranking them. They're, one's gonna slip underneath the other. But I will say, if season 3 wasn't around, if we were just judging off the first 2 seasons, maybe this changes a little bit. And maybe, like you said, in a year it'll change then. So, um, but yeah, I'm okay with this pick at the 3 because of all of that. And again, great show, but just not quite as good as the 2 that we have above.
yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think The Mandalorian, also the 3rd season, I mean, teased a lot of stuff that didn't ever, like
Mhm,
I think the whole season, I said this during our reactions, I was like, "Ooh, the armorer is gonna be a double agent." Like, "Ooh, Moff Gideon is
mhm,
actually doing blah, blah, blah. Oh, the
right.
Mythosaur is gonna be in the last episode," and, like, it felt like it was teasing stuff all season, and then nothing, like, huge happened,
No.
so anyways, that was just another point I wanted to add in there, but, those are our 3rd, 4th, and 5th rankings for our live action TV shows. I think what we're gonna do now is rather than reveal the 2nd, we're gonna reveal our top ranked shows, and then shortly thereafter also have the 2nd place ranked shows revealed. I don't know, we might have the
Yeah.
same list 1 through 5,
We
Joey.
might. So this was the pick that I wasn't sure where you were gonna go, the number
Right.
3. So I'm like, maybe
I
he's at a 2 and 1.
I saw my rankings today that I had sent Gibbo a few days ago, and I was, like, looking at them, and I was just like, "Should I switch 1 and 2?" So even to this like, even today as
Mhm.
I sat here looking at them, I was like, 1 and 2 are so close for me,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously one of them is Ahsoka and one of them is Andor, and so there's a little bit of recency bias that comes into play in
Mhm.
regards to where I put Ahsoka versus where I put Andor because Ahsoka we've just finished, Andor it's been like, about a year since we finished the 1st season, so, um, yeah, looking forward to seeing what you did for this pick, Joey.
Let's see it.
We are the
Ah!
same! I would love to hear Gibbo's reaction as
Wow.
well for when we both sent him our lists and he's like, "Guys, these are the exact same thing." Gibbo, did you see Joey's list and think, "Wait, this is the same as Ben's list?" Oh, I don't know if Gibbo is, on the microphone right now or not,
Yeah.
but, yeah, so for those actually who are listening to the audio version and not seeing what just happened, Joey and I's number 1 pick is both Ahsoka, and both of our number 2 pick is Andor, so
I can't that is incredible that we did that.
I was this close to putting Andor at my number
Mhm.
1, though, I really was.
I was pretty solid on my 1 too.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
solid on it, yeah.
Do you wanna talk about Ahsoka or Andor first?
Okay, Andor, I would say yeah, let's talk about Andor first.
Okay, you
And
wanna
yeah, I'll start off with the Andor
okay.
discussions here. Um, so with Andor, and this is the show that you kind of mentioned earlier that not it kind of flew under the radar. Not a lot of people were hyping it up going into the to the series, really having a lot of expectations, a lot of hype going into it. But it ended up being such a great show, with all of the characters, all of the writing. Mon Mothma has my heart now for sure. There's just so, and these characters that someone like Cassian Andor coming from the Rogue One movie. By the way, top 3 Star Wars movie, right? Um,
Mhm.
the to have all of that happen And again, this kind of did, let's just go back a little bit. At the beginning, kind of a slow start. We had to get through it, the first few episodes, but after that, it was just episode by episode. It was more and more hype, a lot more action, a lot more at stake. It felt like every single episode, so
Mhm.
it's kept building and building. And honestly, I think the finale really came through for us as well, with a battle there, and it was just, yeah, I think everything was near perfect, honestly, because it was such a good show. It laid a lot of groundwork for a lot of the rest of the Star Wars universe, and I was incredibly surprised by how much I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I think this was the show I referenced earlier when I was talking about how Obi-Wan had a large expectation that kind of let people down. This show had almost no expectation and shocked people with how great it was. I think the storytelling and the depth of the characters and just the way that it builds the story is probably the best of any of these 5 shows, I would say, actually. And then, of course, the obvious question is, well, why do you have it at 2 and not at 1? I'm gonna be completely honest with you. This is very much biased, I think, because I genuinely love the character of Ahsoka. I think 4 or 5 episodes into this show, we were all thinking this is the best Star Wars has been in terms of live action TV shows, maybe with the exception of the last episode of the 2nd season of The Mandalorian. Um, and I really enjoyed it. There was a lot to enjoy. Well, now I'm talking about Ahsoka. Let me finish talking about Andor, and then I'll go back to Ahsoka. When it comes to Andor, I think it goes back to the sentiment that there is a lot um, to be addressed in the universe of Star Wars outside of our typical Jedi Sith conflict. Like this is someone who is just like this average dude, not really a good guy. In fact, he's kind of a bad guy at the
Right.
beginning of this show.
Mhm.
And I think that also is something that attracts me to this show is this is not like a here's this like good guy and then he does all the good stuff and then like the bad team loses and the good guy wins. No, this is like he's like pretty much he's a criminal who gets like worked into the becoming a part of the eventual rebellion, and then we see how of course how this all plays out in Rogue One. The prison episodes are some of my favorite, not just Star Wars television, but just Star Wars in general. Andy
Mhm.
Serkis is an incredible actor. I think he is um, wildly underrated in this show. For those that also don't know, Andy Serkis played Supreme Leader Snoke in the sequel trilogy.
Kino
R.I.P.
Snoke.
R.I.P. Snoke. Yeah,
Kino
Kino is
Kino
Snoke.
Snoke. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, Joey and I had this running joke for a while that the origin story of Supreme Leader Snoke is actually just Kino from the prison.
Mhm.
So, will it be true or not? We'll have to wait and see if that's confirmed. But this is basically like the most mature Star Wars show, I would
Mm.
say. It's kind of just like watching a fun spy thriller, and it's really enjoyable all the way through. It's a lot of intrigue, it's a lot of deceit, and the character of Andor is like oddly uh welcoming and inviting into like his story for someone who is very morally gray at the start of this show. So
Right, okay.
yeah, it's a heavy show, but I think it's super rewarding. There's a lot of people that are down on Andor. I think this is a fantastic show personally. So um it goes slightly below Ahsoka for me, only because
I
I
mean
love the character of Ahsoka so much.
Mhm.
Were the last 2 episodes of this show exactly what we wanted? Maybe not. Were they bad? I don't think by any means. I know there's lots of people who are really down on the last 2 episodes of Ahsoka.
Really?
I didn't feel that same way. Oh my gosh, yeah, like, I see stuff on, like, Star Wars Reddit and just watching Star
Mm.
Wars YouTubers. There's people that, like, did not like episode 7 and episode 8 of Ahsoka.
Huh.
Were they as strong as, like, episodes 3, 4, and 5? Maybe not, but I didn't think they were anywhere near bad. I'm excited to see where the world of, this Ahsoka show takes us. Thrawn is now a threat again. How are we gonna get off Peridia? And then I think the most intriguing part about this show, which is ultimately one of the small pieces that put it above Andor, I love Balin. Balin's
Mhm.
character is so
Mhm.
cool. There's so much mystery, there's so much intrigue. Like that's what we want from shows. We want questions that don't feel easy to answer, and that when we do get the answer, it's like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
what makes a cool Star Wars show, Like, the reveal at the end of this season where he's standing on the hand of one of the Mortis gods, it's just like, "Whoa, we've just, like, crossed over into a whole 'nother territory here. This is gonna be great." I hope we don't see Balin's story go by the wayside in season 2, due to the untimely passing of the actor Ray Stevenson. I really don't know how they're going to go about this, but I really hope the approach they take is not that they just drop it and we never hear about Balin again. So, all that being said, it might be recency bias, it might be personal bias because I just love the character of Ahsoka, but I'm going with that show number 1. What was the main reason you put that number 1 over Andor for
There's
you?
a lot of the same. I mean, we just watched it. There's some characters in there that I absolutely love: Ahsoka, Sabine, Hera, Captain Teva. So I mean, there's definitely a little bit of a bias going into it. But the thing is that because of those characters that I already enjoy, I don't feel that they did those characters wrong at all. If that makes sense, right? Because I have this idea of who these characters are, right? Because of Rebels, because of Clone Wars, and I think they did them. I think they did them justice, and I think that's a huge part of why I enjoyed it. Now, are there little things here and there that maybe are a little different, like Ahsoka's kind of overall personality throughout the show, right? In comparison to what you're used to in Clone Wars and with Snips and with Anakin and how they were. And I'll say it again, like how I did with when we were talking about the Last Jedi last episode, is that these characters are people, or they're that they are, they have seen some things that they have to grow into, or they're battered, they're beaten, and they have to have, they're gonna be some scars, whether they be physically, emotional, no, now, so with all the stuff that Ahsoka has seen over her time, I could see that she's gonna be a little bit different from what we've seen in the Clone Wars, a little bit more mature, grown up. Now, did it go to a bit of a, too far of a level, like a little bit too stoic? Maybe here and there, but I still feel the general character of Ahsoka is kind of the same, where her heart is. And she did have to come back to it a little bit after the World Between Worlds episode where she kind of, was a little bit lighter, after that. And I think Alex, when we were watching it with her, she was the one that kind of mentioned like, "Oh, look, she's like wearing the all white. She's a little bit, lighter as far as her personality and things like that." So I think, especially having these discussions with other people really does help out. So definitely watch out for next episode when we have other people on the panel. But to have those characters, I have my thoughts on, who they should be, the Sabines, the Heras, even the Choppers out there, the war criminal. I think we should always, I think they did right by all of those characters. Of course, Dave Filoni is a big part of it, so of course it's gonna be like, pretty much a one-for-one comparison of how they're gonna be. So, to sum up, that's why I liked Ahsoka the most, number 1, because the characters that I've grown to love in Rebels and in Clone Wars, really came to life on real action, on live action here. So easy number 1 for me, Ahsoka. And yeah, yeah, that was my list.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think most more than anything, it kind of just felt the most like classic Star Wars, and so I think that's also
Mhm.
kind of why I put it at my number 1 as well. So
I mean, it has lightsabers, so that's pretty important.
we love those lightsabers. And again, for those of you maybe not watching the video version of the podcast and you're just listening, a quick recap for Joey and I's top 5 live action Star Wars show rankings. We had The Book of Boba Fett at number 5, Obi-Wan Kenobi at number 4, Mandalorian at number 3, Andor at number 2, and Ahsoka at number 1. Joey and I proving that we are turning more and more into the same person with the exact same rankings.
I was actually I was Mandalorian was gonna be the one that I wasn't sure where you were going to, and if we both hit number 3, I was confident that we would get the same list altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, maybe a year from now, I could interchange 1, 2, or 3. Those 3 shows for me are kind
Mhm.
of like a tier above Obi-Wan and maybe even 2 tiers above Boba Fett, so,
Sure.
this has been our list, which also is a great opportunity to once again pose the question to each of you listening and watching. How do you rank these 5 Star Wars live action TV shows? Let us know down in the comments or on the socials. Again, you can also reach us at any of the socials at Hoth Hangout. Get us your top 5 rankings. Maybe even be on the lookout for the Hoth Hangout community poll. Maybe we'll post
Ooh.
something over there leading up to the release of this episode. So be on the lookout for that. Again, the question of the week: how do you rank the Star Wars live action TV shows? Let us know in the comments below, which is also, as Joey just mentioned a few moments ago, a great opportunity for us to once again promo next week's Hoth Hangout podcast episode. We're going to be doing a sort of first shot at our Jedi Knights of the Round Table series within our podcast. Hoping to make this more of a reoccurring thing where we invite other members of the Star Wars podcasting community and the Star Wars YouTube community to kind of come onto the pod and we'll have a topic and we'll discuss and we'll kind of just share our experiences as Star Wars fans. And so, what other topic would we be talking about next week, other than the Star Wars live action TV shows? Kind of similar to what we discussed today. So next week's podcast will focus mainly on hearing some thoughts and perspectives from each of our guests, which at this time I'm very happy to announce are Laney Byers from YouTube. We'll have each of these guests' information available in the show notes of this episode and next week's episode if you're interested in checking any of them out leading up to the next episode of the pod or following next week's podcast. Laney Byers from YouTube does some awesome Star Wars reactions here on YouTube. Additionally, Ezra from the Star Wars Hangout podcast. For those of you who might remember, Joey and I went on the Star Wars Hangout podcast probably like 3 months ago at this point, something like that. So we're, Ezra's a really great guy, awesome dude. We'll link his channel down in the show notes below. Glad to have him back on our podcast after we going on his. So he'll be our second guest, and then our final guests will be Kerwin and Keith from the Father Son Galaxy podcast, Star Wars podcast that we recently discovered here on YouTube. So in total, we'll have 4 guests next week: Laney Byers, Ezra, Kerwin, and Keith. So it'll be fun. We'll get to hear from each of them their thoughts on Disney live action Star Wars TV shows and kind of get their rankings perhaps as well. So be on the lookout for that. That will be available. Let's see, the 13th. Am I correct? Do I have my dates correct?
Sounds
Uh,
right.
December 13th, I want to say. No, I'm sorry. December 14th will
14th,
be the
yes.
release date of that episode. So this episode here will be released on December 7th. So um, I think that about does it. If you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout podcast, check us out on YouTube. Smash the like and subscribe button over there. Thank you to the 351 of you who are current subscribers to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel. We appreciate you so very much. Additionally, we're reachable via email at hothhangout@gmail.com. Shoot us your questions or thoughts, Star Wars related or otherwise. We'd love to showcase them here on the podcast. Additionally, you can always check out the Hoth Hangout podcast on Spotify and Apple and anywhere you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star review on each of those platforms. We would appreciate it so very much. Additionally, you can check out Hoth Hangout on the socials, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, or X at Hoth
X.
Hangout. X. At Hoth Hangout is the handle for each of those various social platforms. And lastly, of course, we want to say thank you to Gibbo for producing the show, videos, and assets, and for being our number one in every list. Appreciate you, Gibbo. Gibbo, by the way, I don't know if we heard from you earlier. What were your thoughts on the list that Joey and I provided when you realized that we gave you the exact same thing?
Yeah, I thought you were going to mold in together, but I also Joey sent them in 1 to 5, and you sent them in 5 to 1, so I was a bit confused to start with.
You're like, wait, these guys did the exact same thing. Oh my gosh.
And also the opposite thing apparently as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We are becoming more and more the same person in our Star Wars opinions, Joey.
You might start losing hair like me, so be
Yeah,
careful.
honestly, I might. I'm thinning up there. So, you got any more thoughts about Star Wars live action TV shows before we sign off for this one, Joey?
I'm just excited for more of it. Skeleton Crew, Acolyte, that I know it's going to be a little while for that, but we'll have season 2 of Andor eventually. Hopefully,
Mhm.
another season of Mandalorian. I think Disney Plus is doing a great job producing these. Maybe didn't hit it out of the park with Boba Fett, but Still a good a lot of good content coming from Disney Plus and live action TV. So I'm happy.
Hopefully we get that Andor season 2 trailer soon. We'll see.
Ooh, yes.
I would love to see it. But thank you all so much for listening. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Thank you for listening to episode 59 of the Hoth Hangout podcast, covering our Disney live action TV show rankings. We'll hope to see you next week when we bring on all of our fantastic guests. Once again, each of their channels and information will be down in the show notes below. And until the next time, thank you so much for listening to the Hoth Hangout podcast. We appreciate you all so very much. We'll catch you in the next one, and may the force be with you.